Of all the training sessions in this series, this one may be the most important because it lays the foundation for how Denari is designed. If you don't understand how Denari uses codes, you will find it difficult to get the information back in the form of reports later on. Therefore, anyone new to Denari must start here. Codes are simply ways to tag a piece of information. For example, at some point we may want to get a report giving us a list of all the people who have blue eyes. We can first create or set up that code in our database and then assign that to all those people in the data who have blue eyes. We can then easily produce a report giving us that list just by telling the database to grab those names with that code. All databases group information as entities, which is a fancy way of saying that the information that is similar is all stored together. In Denari, you'll find names, gifts, pledges, sponsored names, field agents, and many other entities. Each of these have their own set of codes, and it's important to differentiate between them. There are gift codes, name codes, pledge codes, etc. Those three groups are the biggies, so we'll start with those. Let's start with gifts. There are two main codes that are common to all gift records. In fact, Denari requires that every gift you enter into Denari has both of those. They are the appeal code and the fund code. First, let's talk about the appeal code. It tracks where the gift came from. It answers the question, what fundraising function generated this gift? Each time you initiate a fundraising function like a golf tournament, a speaking engagement, a special letter that you send out, etc., you can create an appeal code to represent the gifts that are raised as a result. Coding your gifts with appeal codes allows you to get a list of gifts that are raised by event or function. It allows you to evaluate the success of those functions. Let's look briefly at how we create an appeal code. We can set up an appeal code by clicking on the plus sign and then going to appeal codes. Here's a list of all the appeal codes that are already in this demo company. We would click add new to create a new one. And here we see that there are actually only two fields that are required here at the top, but then there's this third campaign code that is required. The description is for you. This tells you what this appeal code is about. So you might type in here Spring Banquet 2016 or something like that. The appeal code is for Denari. It tells Denari that this appeal code is separate from any other appeal code. It has to be unique. You can't have two appeal codes with the same code. But other than that, you can put pretty much whatever you want in there. The campaign for appeals is also required. A campaign, and we'll talk about this more in a few seconds, but the campaign groups a bunch of appeal codes together. So this field allows you to put this appeal code that you're creating into one of these groups. And again, we'll talk more about this in a few minutes. So this is a required field for appeal codes. Other than that, the rest of these fields are optional, and we'll talk more about them in a separate video. So once you've filled in those three fields, you can click the Save button to create your appeal code. The second required gift is the fund code. The fund code tracks where the money is going or what you are going to spend it on. It is the thing for which you are raising money. Quite often, although it is not a hard and fast rule, your fund codes will parallel your accounting system. You will have fewer fund codes than you will appeal codes because each time a new fundraising function is performed, you will create a new appeal code. But you won't create new fund codes very often. Let's look at how we create a fund code. Click on the plus sign and go to fund codes. Again, we see a list of the codes already in this data. Click add new to create a new one. Here we have two required fields, the description and the code, and those follow the same rules as we saw with appeal codes. The description is for you. The fund code is for Denari, and the code has to be unique. You can't have two codes the same. Again, the rest of these fields are all optional, and we'll discuss those in a separate video. So once you've filled in these two required fields, you click Save, and you're ready to go. Now that we have appeal and fund codes created, we can enter gifts into Denari. but we'll save that for later when we talk about gift entry. For now, just remember that they are there and what they do. There are two codes that are related to appeal and fund codes. They are campaigns and departments. Both group codes together. Campaigns group appeal codes and departments group fund codes. For example, let's say that throughout the year you do special letter campaigns where you send solicitations to groups of your donors. Maybe you do one for each season, spring, fall, summer, and winter. First, you will create an appeal code for each mailing. When it comes time to report on these fundraising letter solicitations, you can get a list of all the gifts that came in as a result of the spring letter, another report for the summer letter, etc. One way to group them together is by creating a campaign code and linking each appeal code to that campaign. In this example, we might create a campaign called Letter Solicitations 2016. Now we can get a report for that campaign, which will then include all of the gifts for those 4 appeal codes. Campaigns are required, however, because they affect credit card and EFT transactions, which we'll talk more about later in the video about credit cards. For now, if you don't care what campaign an appeal is linked to, just simply link it to a default. And so now let's look at how to create a campaign. Again, we go to the plus sign, find campaigns, and we're going to click Add New to create the new one. And again, only the 2 fields are required, description and code, and they follow the same rules as we saw with the other records that we created. So hit save and you have your campaign. Now we've already seen how we can link then an appeal code to this campaign. If we had several appeal codes that we wanted to group under this campaign, we go to each of those appeal code records and select this campaign in that drop-down field. Now let's set up a department. Again, go to the plus sign and down to departments. Here we'll click Add New. This was, again, really simple form. We're going to fill in the description and the code and hit save, and we've created the department. And once again, just like with appeal codes, we can go to the fund code setup form and select this department in that fund code in order to group those fund codes together. So those are the codes that are associated with gifts. It is important to keep that straight. However, there is one exception just to make things a little more confusing. An appeal code can also be linked to a name record. Appeal codes in this case still represent your fundraising functions, but when linked to a name, they are tracking where that name came from. They answer the question, what fundraising function generated this new name record? We'll talk more about this in the video on name records, but for the most part, hang on to this. Appeal codes and fund codes, campaigns, and departments belong to gifts. Now, let's move on to pledges. Good news, they're the same. Each pledge that you enter into Denari must also have an appeal code and fund code associated, and pledges use the same list as do gifts, so we don't need to learn anything new here. There are many name codes available. Some are better than others when it comes to reporting, so you make sure you see all of these before you begin making decisions about how you will organize your data. The first name-related code is called the name code. So let's go to a name record and see where we find that. The name code field is the first here on the list. Notice that this field is a free-form field. That means that you can type anything you want there. That is both good and bad. It's good because you can type anything you want. It's bad because you may type something one way while someone else may type it differently. When it comes time to use that field as a filter in a report, those different ways of entering the code will cause Denari to not give you a complete list. So for the most part, this field should not be used for coding donors. It can be used, however, for display. Visually, you can use that field to pick out certain types of name records if you have a need for that. For example, you may want to know that this donor speaks Spanish, and so you might put that into that field. Another way to code name records is with the name type field, and we have that here. The name type field is a drop-down field, which means that you must first create the list of codes that you want to use with your data. This field is used in reporting to group your donors into large groupings, and we highly recommend that you keep your list of name types very short. Most organizations start with just individual and organization. For example, you may want to do a mailing to anyone who gave more than $500 last year, but you want to limit that to just individuals. Name type is perfect for that. But let's say you have decided to use name type for other codes like people with blue eyes, tall people, etc. If you want to find a list of people who have both blue eyes and tall people, you can't do that using name type. It will only allow one filter at a time. There are better codes to use to get this type of report. Now, to set up our name type or our list of name types, again we're going to go to the plus sign and come down to name types. Click Add New. And this one's really simple. Fill in the description. So if we were going to create a name type called individual, that's what we'd put in that field and click Save. Or we could click the plus sign to create a second name type, which may be organization, etc. And again, we recommend that you keep that list fairly short. So let's go back to the name record. And again, once now we have that name type record created, we will be able to select it from the list. A third way to code donors is called jurisdiction. Jurisdiction is a drop-down field as well, so you'll need to create that list also in the same way that we created the name type. This is an optional field, so you don't have to use it if it's not needed. So let's look at where we go to set up the jurisdiction list. Again, we'll click the plus sign and go to jurisdictions. Click Add New and enter the description and the code. And again, those are the only two required fields, so we can simply click Save, and we've created our jurisdiction. The original purpose for jurisdiction was to indicate ownership of a name record. For example, you may have someone in your organization who is responsible for your major donors. You would, in this example, set up the name of that person who's responsible in the jurisdiction list. Now go to each of their major donor name records and link that name to that person in the jurisdiction field. You could now use that field to get a list of donors that person is responsible for. You can target mailings to them, check on their giving progress, produce a call list, etc. Jurisdiction has also been used when staff members are responsible for raising personal support. They can be set up in the jurisdiction list and assigned to their donors as well. Some organizations have used this field for other things. For example, radio stations who have multiple broadcast points with a variety of call letters have used this field to show which station their donors are listening to. This allows them to target mailings and other information to the correct audience. This field is a little more flexible when it comes to reports than name type, but not a lot. It does allow you, however, to include multiple jurisdictions as filters. Another possible way, an optional way to code donors is caseworker. And again, let's go back to our name list. And here we find the caseworker field. And to create a new caseworker, we click on the plus sign again and go to caseworker. Add new and fill in the description and the code and save. And then of course once we have that list created, we can use that to select those records in name record. Finally, the most flexible way to code donors is by using classifications. Classifications can be anything you want them to be. You can have as many as you want, and you can assign as many as you want to any one name record. When it comes time to use them for reporting, you can use them in combinations, and you can use them to exclude groups of people from lists. Let me give you some examples. If you want to keep track of all the people by relationship to your organization, you can create those classifications and then assign them appropriately. So you might have people who attended the spring banquet, major donors, people who don't want mail, people who are volunteers, etc. Whatever list of classifications you want, you can create. When it comes time to do a mailing, you may want to target the major donors who attended the spring banquet. Or you may want to get a list of volunteers who attended the spring banquet. Those scenarios are both possible using classifications. One of the things that makes classifications powerful is the ability to exclude classifications from your output. For example, you may want to do a mailing to the people who attended the spring banquet, but exclude those who have told you they don't want mail. Classifications are the only code system in Denari that allows you to do that. So it is by far the best way to code your donors. Let's look at how you will create your list of classifications. Again, we'll go to that plus sign and come down to classifications. We'll click Add New and enter the description and code just like we've done for all the other codes that we've created so far. But we also have this category field. Denari puts classifications into one of 5 categories, and you can rename those categories, but you can't add to them and you can't delete them. You're stuck with those 5 categories. And we'll look here in a few minutes of how we might change those categories. But for now, to create a new one, we would select a category and click Save, and now they'll appear in one of those groupings. So again, let's go back to the Names tab, Nameless Management, and we'll select our name. Now, to use these classifications, we're going to go here to the classification page for this donor, and here we see those 5 categories. To select one of these classifications or to assign it to this name record, we simply select it here on the left side, click the little arrow to move it over to the right side, and we can move as many as we want in any of these categories that we want. So again, we can assign as many or have as many classifications as we want. And then of course, if we wanted to remove a classification from somebody, we just move it the other direction to unselect it there. And so now this particular donor has 5 different classifications assigned. Now again, let's look at those categories. As I said a minute ago, we can only have 5, but we can change them if we want to. And to do that, we're going to go to the plus sign again, and then Class Categories. And there are the 5 that we have set up so far in the demo company. If we wanted to change mission causes, for example, because it just doesn't fit what we do, we simply select it, make the change here, and hit Save, and now that category is changed over in the name record where we just saw it and everywhere else throughout Denari. So this concludes this section on Denari codes. An important thing to remember here is that the codes are unique to their entities. You can't assign classifications, for example, to a gift or a pledge. You can't assign a fund code to a donor. This knowledge will greatly improve your reporting ability later on and will be discussed in reporting videos as well. As always, if you have any questions, please contact tech support through the support link found under the help at the top of the Denari page.